College football nerds here talking Tennessee and Oklahoma. It is a big game, maybe the biggest game this week. I'm sure there will be some random team that's really highly ranked that drops a weird one, but for us, and we're doing reviews, this is the game. Josh is here with me. He's going to get nerdy with y'all as well as myself. And I think, Josh, I just want to start with I'm excited for this game because neither one of these teams have really played anybody of note. And, we did a top 10 where we talked about Tennessee in particular, in that it's hard to judge them right now because they're killing everybody, but they have one of the weakest schedules in the country. And for those of y'all who didn't see it, it was a really good discussion, but we've maintained this for years. You can't help your schedule in a lot of ways. They scheduled a P4 out of conference. They can't help how bad Kent State is. They're one of the worst teams in the country. You can't help your schedule. You can only help how you play against your schedule. So from that standpoint, Tennessee's done great. A+. I had Tennessee in my top 10 week one. I think they're a great team, but there are question marks there. So, Josh, I just want to start with, we're not picking the game yet. We're not picking the winner yet. I want you to start with sort of what you're most excited to see from both of these two teams now that they're finally playing someone. By the way, we asked on Twitter, which team do you think might be really good, but you're really excited to see play to confirm that? Tennessee was the number one team. So tell me what you think about that.
I mean, we did a preview of the Tennessee-NC State game. I picked Tennessee to win by a comfortable margin. I didn't expect them to blow them out that bad. But let's be realistic. I think something that's come out is that North Carolina State is a bad team. As of today, as we're recording this, they benched or announced they're benching Grayson McCall. They're not good. They're just not good. And that's not a ding on Tennessee because Tennessee waltzed out there and just obliterated them like you should a bad team. And we always say the hallmark of an elite team is they generally obliterate bad teams, and they do so on a consistent basis. So I've got no reason to doubt Tennessee, but looking at right now, FEI's strength of schedule rankings, Tennessee sitting there at 118th for an average team. For an elite team, it's 96th, and that's pretty low. The difference being an elite team, you play teams in a certain bracket, and it kind of stops mattering how low they are past a certain point. For an elite team, that number is usually about 65th or 70th in the country. It doesn't really matter if you're 80th or 90th or 100th or 120th. It's almost all the same because it's just more about how much you screw up at that point. The other team doesn't really create any real friction in of themselves. So I am excited to see Tennessee play a real team. And I do think in this game, Oklahoma presents a real test. We'll get into it a little bit, the positives and negatives there. Oklahoma defensively is excellent. Again, looking at these same metrics for Oklahoma, defensively they're 13th in the country. Tennessee is a fun matchup. They're 9th in the country defensively. So I think, first off, that's really the strength of both teams. Even as good as Tennessee's offense has been, I think the defense has been better. The stats back that up. And I think both these teams offensively have shown a lot. Tennessee has been just walking on air as far as they're concerned, and I'm excited to see Oklahoma's defense play against that. Well, at the same time, Oklahoma has dealt with a ton of injury issues, created a lot of inconsistency. They settled down a little bit, I thought, against Tulane. Tulane gave them a scare late after a pick six. I will say, Daniel, this is another thing, too. As exciting as Oklahoma is, as exciting as Tennessee is, and as much as we say, well, Tennessee hasn't played anybody, I don't think it's entirely fair to say Oklahoma hasn't played anybody, because I do think there's evidence that Tulane's actually a pretty good team, and I think it's actually pretty justifiable that they had a tough game against Tulane, because I actually think they're one of the top 3 G5s in the country this year.
Yeah, and it's a fair point. And I should have said they haven't played a name brand, but you're right. They played Kansas State super tight, and Kansas State's not a bad team this year either. And that game against Oklahoma didn't really feel like Oklahoma was ever in any kind of danger to lose that game. One of the things that's interesting to me about this is I think Oklahoma is one of quietly the better defensive teams in the country. I think they're better than their current like FEI ranking too. Like to me, I'd put them somewhere in the top 10 defensively. I do wonder though. I'm concerned a little bit when I watch Oklahoma play offense. Temple, that 51 points is very misleading. It wasn't a great day offensively for Oklahoma. There was a lot of really, really bad offensive performance from Temple that led to really short fields, turnovers. That really, the offense from Temple drove a lot of the offensive scoring for Oklahoma. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I am curious, like, let's say, for example, Oklahoma's defense is a top 5 defense this year, but Tennessee's offense is who we think they are. How important is it for Oklahoma offensively to really shorten the game and really make sure that they're not giving Tennessee opportunities, especially in this Heupel offense that's going to score quick, that they're not giving them opportunities to, even if you're playing good defense, the dam's going to break a little bit, right?
It's an interesting point because I thought about that too. Both these offenses move at pretty significant tempo. One of the more interesting things to me when you break down a lot of Tennessee's games and their scoring, just last week, right? They get to the half in that game, really an absurd 65-0. But the thing that's the most absurd about that I think people miss is the number of possessions it takes to get to 65-0. Tennessee played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 possessions in the first half. They only played 3 in the second half, and that was with a normal clock. And that's the difference between playing at ultra tempo and throwing the ball a lot and not. And so that there is a real possibility this game is extremely long in terms of possessions and maybe even play count. And that's going to wear on both teams. And I think Oklahoma, weirdly, and you see this, I think, sometimes with really young offensive lines, I felt like their offensive line got worn out actually late in the game. They were playing worse. Normally you get an advantage because the defenders get tired, they slow down, they don't get as much disruption. I thought the opposite happened. And Tennessee has some really, really good defensive linemen. And I think if they're in a situation where those guys are allowed to sort of tee off, it could get bad. Because let's make no mistake here, there's no sugarcoating and a way to dance around it. Pierce and company for Tennessee on the defensive line is the biggest mismatch on this game. Oklahoma is a mash unit up front. And the big thing if you're Oklahoma is avoiding negative plays, trying to keep things contained and measurable, not letting Tennessee be able to dictate the game by getting into the backfield too much and too often. And I think the longer this game goes, especially given the fact that Oklahoma is a mash unit at wide receiver as well, the higher that risk is. Because Oklahoma, why are they at like 5.6 yards per attempt against Tulane? They don't really have the ability to separate downfield, and they don't have the ability to pass protect. They've got to make this a long drive, short passing game. There's a lot of orbit motion stuff going on, 2 guys in the backfield a lot, and it's all about trying to move the ball horizontally at short yardage to extend drives. That hopefully burns clock. If that's not working and you're not burning clock, if you've got to be vertical, if you've got to attack quickly, this thing can snowball really, really fast for Oklahoma. So they need this to be a short game and a close game. They cannot, I think, play from behind, and they cannot play, I think, a particularly fast-paced game with too many plays. I just think they're going to wear out, and once this becomes a track meet, Oklahoma's going to be in a really bad position.
So the flip side of this is Tennessee offensively, and there are some question marks. I don't care how much you score on Kent State, just because, and again, this isn't Tennessee's fault. Like, Kent State's terrible, but Tennessee didn't, like, they have to play who's on their schedule, but I think Pitt scored 59 or something, 50-something on this Kent State team. They're really bad. So there is this question, and it's not an absolute, it's not a negative, it's an incomplete. We don't know what Nico's going to do on the road. We don't know what Nico's going to do in a really hostile environment. We don't know what Nico's going to do. Like, we did see him against a good defense in Iowa last year. So, we can't just say, well, he's played nobody this year and, that's a huge question mark. We do know that he can perform at least in some capacity against a good defense. But there is that question of going on the road, really hostile crowd. One of the things that we've noted about Carson Beck is it seems like he's very Jekyll and Hyde, and he gets shook on the road. At least the evidence we have to this point. Georgia hasn't played a lot of really big road games. If you're looking at this game right now, Tennessee's a 7-point favorite. It feels like they should be a little more, and I think that's just because of maybe the lopsided nature of the competition. Is Nico being rattled on the road, maybe just because he's, really getting his feet wet? Is that something that you think has to happen for Oklahoma to win the game?
Yeah. To a certain degree, yes. I think this is something that Oklahoma needs to have happen to be able to win. I mean, Tennessee, people focus on Nico because he's the story. Iamaleava. Ia is wrong, right? It's Iamaleava. I've been trying really hard to pronounce that correctly. He's the story. He's the cool thing. He's a super accurate passer, big dude, 5-star recruit. The reason they're winning the way they're winning are Bishop, Sampson, and Lewis. I mean, the running backs for Tennessee have been absolutely dominant. And if you go back and look at like the NC State game for Tennessee, they threw it really well. But again, Nico was 23 attempts, 211 yards at sub 10 yards an attempt. Dylan Sampson carried the ball 20 times for 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nico himself as a runner had 8 carries for 65. Bishop had 10 carries for 42. That was a predominantly run-based offense, and I don't think that was just a matter of having the lead. They kind of ran their offense the whole game. This is a run-first team. So, to your point about being shook offensively, I think there's 2 parts to it. One, I think this is the best defense they've faced with Nico. I think Oklahoma is a better defensive team than Iowa was last year. I don't know if that's shocking to people. I think they are, from what I've seen. I think Iowa was really, really sound and good in a lot of ways. I think they were limited in certain ways. I think Oklahoma is actually a little bit better. I think they're quite good, probably underratedly good this year. And that's going to do 2 things. One is it's probably going to make the running game a lot harder. And they're used to playing the style of offense that Tennessee's going to bring a little better than Iowa did. I think Iowa had a lot of issues with the zone read specifically when I watched that bowl game. That was a big takeaway I had. They didn't really know how to line up. Their fits were bad. They weren't used to seeing it because they don't run it a lot in the Big Ten. Oklahoma's really used to seeing that. And then the other thing is in a hostile crowd, if the run game's not working and they've really got to pass, Tennessee's passing game has been based heavily on the RPO. And as I've said a lot, I think Nico reminds me a lot of like Tua Tagovailoa in that a lot of those RPO plays almost look like a long handoff. I mean, he's almost uniquely accurate at a lot of them. Wide boundary throws can really put the ball directly on a target. But he has a very particular throwing style. Like everything he throws is kind of a direct dart. People laughed when I talked about like arcing the ball and not being great at it. What I mean by that is things like fades, balls where you really want to drop it over coverage in a bucket. He's not great at that. He's got a guy going downfield, and he can laser him the ball 40 yards, and that's why he's really good. And to be clear, that's a really, really good trait. But certain defenses can take away a certain type of throw, and if you can layer coverage, then you got to throw deep over coverage. And I think that's been a little bit of a challenge for him. When I've seen him throw interceptions, that's usually where it's come. And the other thing I'll say with him is, I do think he processes sometimes a little slowly, and that doesn't come up in RPOs. Is the thing people don't understand. If you watch his highlight tapes and people can show me 50 touchdowns, 85% of those plays are RPOs or single read plays. And those plays, he's reading one guy, I'm going to throw short, roll long, and he's fine with those, and he's really good, makes a quick decision. But when he actually has to make read-based progressions through a standard passing tree, he's a little slow. He's a little hesitant, probably because he hasn't played a ton. And I think being in a really loud, hostile environment may amplify that if and only if Oklahoma can stymie the run game well enough to force Tennessee to be in a position where they have to throw in a more traditional run game or a passing game. Because, if you're on 3rd and 2, Tennessee can still run the RPO. If it's 3rd and 9, you can't because Oklahoma doesn't really have to respect the run. So if you run the RPO, it's almost like a play action where the defense knows what's coming. the defenders are going to be playing pass until the ball's handed off, and they can afford to do that. So to me, it's a qualified yes, Daniel, on what they need, whether they need the home field advantage to matter if you're Oklahoma, and then how much it will matter. You've got to be able to put yourself in a position for it to matter. You've got to get to 3rd and long. You've got to get to 2nd and 8. And I think that's going to be a lot of where the battle is in this game between Oklahoma defensively and Tennessee offensively.
The other thing that I'll note, and this is another one where for Oklahoma it's an incomplete. I don't know if they can do this or not because Tennessee's offensive line is playing at a great level right now, but against this level of competition, the glaring thing to me with Nico is he's not under duress. And that's a big transition for a young quarterback, is the first time you really have to play under pressure. If you look at, he had a beautiful throw that I'm going to joke you a little bit on this because he kind of dropped it in the bucket as a boundary throw, touchdown, like a 53-yarder. Man, he had all day. It was an amazing throw, and people say that's tough to do against air. It is, but when you're playing basically 7-on-7, you're going to see a lot higher quality of throw or lower percentage throw getting completed more often, because that's one less thing you have to process mentally. Is you don't have an internal clock that's sped up. You don't have to worry about your blind side. You don't have to worry about, you can lock on your primary read. So there's a lot of these things that I want to see if Oklahoma can get him into that. But I like the thing you did, that you set this up with. Heupel is a lot like Lincoln Riley in that when you think of him, you think of the great quarterbacks, the great passing games that he's produced, but it's really, this offense is very much a run-first offense, a run-based offense. Back when, I think 2022, when they were lighting people up, including Alabama, the run game was the thing that people couldn't stop. And it set up everything else in the pass game. And so I think that you're right. Oklahoma's got to be able to stop the run first, and people think so much stacked wide receivers, deep routes. It's the run game. On the other side, Josh, Jackson Arnold has looked fine. I think some of it is that his internal clock has been sped up against admittedly better competition, but that offensive line is a little bit of a struggle bus situation. And I wonder, there's these question marks on whether or not Tennessee's secondary can hold up down the stretch in tougher games. But I don't know that this is the game that we're going to really find out about it if Oklahoma's offensive line can't hold their own.
I think it's a fair point. Arnold, to me, when he started the season, I felt like he pressed a lot. There were sometimes you just want to go, whoa, don't throw that. We saw that late in the Tulane game. He got pressure, tried to rip one over the middle, which is a bad idea. Never throw late over the middle, and got it picked off for a pick six. That's why that game ended up being so close. But at times when he seems to have calmed down and the clock's at a normal pace, I can see the flashes of why people are so high on him. And I'll be honest, Daniel, as much as he struggled a little bit, I'm not sure that he isn't a better quarterback than Dylan Gabriel. I mean, the situations are so different, and I think Arnold with a little more polish would be in a much better place. It's just the offensive line is such a problem. And there are times where in pass pro they do pretty well. I definitely think they're better in pass protection than in the run game, but they don't generate nearly enough push in the run game. I think Barnes is a good back. I think Arnold is a very effective runner, and they can't do a lot with it, which means teams are able to play him a lot more honestly. And then the other problem I see is when teams get very aggressive defensively and they really able to attack that box, they sometimes struggle with those assignments. They let free rushers come too much. And that's, interestingly, philosophically, that gets me into something I wanted to talk about a little bit with this game. They're so different right now offensively, stylistically between the two, as much as they're spread, run and pass attacks and mobile quarterbacks. Heupel in his system is based on splitting the wide receivers to the boundaries. And the idea there is that when they stack wide receivers a lot, and they do that because it lets you get them wider, right? If they're inset, then two of the guys are closer. You stack them, and now you widen the space out that much. And the idea is the defensive backs themselves have to stack, and so you get kind of a minimum of 4 guys outside the box, and that leaves you with 7 guys total to be safeties or run support for the entire rest of the field. The box is usually considered about 8 yards wide. It's very hard to get numbers in the box on Tennessee in that scheme. And philosophically, I think what Tennessee does makes a lot of sense. This challenge with what Tennessee does is it means all your throws are long throws, 53-yard wide field. And you have to have a guy that can really rip it. And Milton could rip it, but not accurately enough, and that's why the offense didn't work. Hooker was a really good quarterback, and it took that to be effective. And I think we've seen from Nico his ability, again, to make those long dart throws has been important. Oklahoma doesn't have a lot of the pieces to make that work. They don't have a quarterback that they, I think, are that confident in to make long throws. They have an offensive line that's giving them a lot of problems. They want to be a run-based team. So it's almost the opposite. They'll have 2 wide receivers out. Probably a lot of it wide receiver depth issue. Part of it strength of the team and wanting extra guys in pass pro. A lot of times they'll either have 2 backs back there or they'll have a wide receiver in an orbit motion, tight end, something. And they'll often have 3 guys in the backfield in the box to where they're trying to stack numbers in the box. Personally, I don't love that approach with a weak offensive line because I've always been of the philosophy the more guys you have as blockers, the more defenders you have in the box to block, and the more opportunities you have to miss a block. A defender that I split wide, which is sort of Tennessee's philosophy, is a defender I cannot fail to block. But I just don't know that Oklahoma has the pieces to do that. So it's really kind of fascinating to me, the battles and how it's set up. And I think Arnold in many ways is set up for failure a lot more than Nico is. But I do see good things. And I see when the run game works, they can be very effective. I just don't know against this Tennessee front that they're the right team to do it. I don't know against this Tennessee secondary they're the right team to do it. But I do find this whole conversation interesting because it's like I keep want to talk myself into saying that Tennessee should win this in a blowout, and maybe they should, but the spread's only 7 points. So, I don't know, Daniel. I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, do you feel like this almost feels like a trap spread? We talk about that sometimes, that I do think in Vegas sometimes in these college games sets up the spread in such a way that people go, oh, Georgia, SEC Championship 2021 was dominant. Auburn had just about beaten Alabama the week prior, and they only gave Georgia, 2.5, 3 points in that game. I remember it was on the radio it was Josh Pate and then the Georgia Sports Illustrated site. I forget what the radio hit was, and we were talking about it, and I made the point at that lead up to the game. It was starting to spook me that the spread was that low. It didn't make sense to me, which made me think. Sometimes I think Vegas is more than happy to let you take the favorite. And this feels like one of those games. It feels like they're setting the public up to take Tennessee because this line's too low. But is it just because I'm that confident in Tennessee, or do you think there's some other angle, Daniel, that I'm missing?
I think it's score picking time, and I think that I am overly swayed. I love me a team that blows everybody out. I'm so unreasonably swayed by that, and right now, I also want to confirm my assumptions in week 1 having Tennessee in my top 10. I got Tennessee 31, Oklahoma 17. I do feel like there's something to this line. I just, that the Temple game scared me a little bit if I'm thinking Oklahoma's going to be good enough to compete with what is a top 5, top 10 team right now. If Oklahoma is who they are currently ranked to be, if Oklahoma is who I think they are, which is probably about the 12th to 15th best team in the country. By the way, I said when I had, when we did the preview with RJ Young, the season preview, I said probably 8-4, and some of that is really just because the schedule is unbelievably brutal for Oklahoma this year. If Oklahoma is that team, Josh, and we're right about Tennessee, then 31-17 makes a lot of sense, does it not? For us to be wrong, or for it to go the way Vegas is saying, we've got one of these two teams wrong. We have to.
Yeah. And that's the thing that gives me pause, and it's the reason this video, all the things we're probing at. I mean, I'll give you my score now, Daniel. It's in my head, I have this game, I'll say 31-21. I don't have a lot of confidence, though. If I were to pick the game, and we've told people before we don't really gamble. I would probably just be taking the under. Like the one thing I feel like is that the defenses are quietly ahead of the offenses. Again, like FEI backs that up. That better statistics or rankings are defensive here, not offensive for both teams. Surprising for Oklahoma. I don't know that the general public is aware of how good Tennessee's defense is, but at the same time, like I feel like Tennessee should win this. It has a good chance of winning it going away. But I feel like there's an extra angle here that we're missing. And I think the answer there may be tied up with the Oklahoma defense. Like, to your point, I think this is probably a top 10 defensive unit nationally. I made the point that I think they're a better fit for what Tennessee does than what Iowa did. And I think maybe on the road, maybe I say it's a 10-point game. Maybe it's a 10-point game with the 3-point, the 3-point deduction for a home field advantage. Maybe that puts it at 7, so maybe that makes perfect sense. But I just feel like there's something there. There's a little bit of an angle there. Maybe Vegas is seeing something to say, hey, maybe this offense. We talk a lot about scaling, right? I know Pate's taken some of the concepts we had about 8 years ago when we were having conversations with him about, I think he called it freeze points. We had called it stall points previously. That offenses don't, I always put it, they don't scale. Like there's certain types of spread offenses, RPO stuff. The Mike Locksley RPO offense, be it at Alabama or Maryland, will obliterate inferior talent week after week, and then they play a team that's just one tier higher, and suddenly they lose, like 17-27, and they've been scoring. There was it like 4 years ago? They went into week 5, the highest scoring offense in the country, averaging over I think 60 points a game, and it's like they didn't score 30 points again. It's just there's certain types of offense that if you can take away the spacing, just a little bit of difference in defensive speed, and proper use of assignments sort of shuts down plays in their entirety, and the whole thing kind of falls apart. I don't think Tennessee's that team. I think they have enough tools in the toolbox. I think Heupel's offense is so annoyingly difficult to defend, mainly because of the numbers problem it creates in the run game. But I don't know. I mean, maybe that's the angle. Maybe that's the angle that Vegas sees, and then maybe even 31-21 is too conservative, and Tennessee is going to run away with it. And again, I still flag if they get a big lead in this game and Oklahoma has to throw, I do think they may run away with it because I don't think Oklahoma's built to do it. So it'll be interesting.
I think if Oklahoma's run game's there and they can shorten the game, that might be that thing that keeps it close. It's rare for me to say I think this team is going to win by 2 touchdowns, and I wouldn't be surprised if the other team won. That's where I'm at right now. That's because I'm with you, Josh. It's really strange. If Oklahoma wins this game, I will be 0% surprised, but I think it's going to say more good about Oklahoma than it does bad about Tennessee because I'm high on Tennessee. I'm high on this roster, and I'm high on that staff. All right, let us know what you think this score is going to be. Give us your predictions. Tell us where we're wrong. Tell us where we're right. Please please subscribe. Tennessee and Oklahoma fans, we haven't seen y'all as much in the last year or two, so if you aren't subscribed, if that notification bell isn't hit, you need to slam it right now, and we'll hit you up in the comments. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.